Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. My name is Christian D. Evans, your host. And guys, we have someone that has been 20 years in this high performance coaching. He's been able to help hundreds upon hundreds of clients really be able to excel and produce incredible results, guys. And I wanted to bring him on today because he had a really interesting, uh, you know, Facebook Live video that he talked about. And I really want to kind of dive into this because today's world, we want to be kind of really brought into something foundational, guys. And that's why I want to bring him on, because he's able to bring something foundational instead of this, kind of direct response marketing and try to, hook you and, tell you a story and try to sell you stuff. It's more of someone just wants some authenticity, right? And, from years upon years experience, I wanted to bring this guy in and really just be able to share his experience, guys. He actually works with, he gets in the trenches, digs deep with his clients, clearly define the unique value proposition and purpose to achieve clarity, focus, and direction in their careers and life. He also helps unique value proposition and purpose to maximize profit and grow their business. My man, please welcome Mike Coluzzi. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Christian. Great to be on here, and I appreciate taking the time to invite me on.
Well, of course, man. And I'm really looking forward to, because obviously you've got an incredible amount of business experience and just life experience as well, 20 years, helping and high performance coach and so forth. But kind of tell me a little bit before jumping into that, what was your life before that? And what, tell a little bit more of that transformation and what that looked like, man.
It's a great question, and I get it all the time. And it really boils down to, hey, why did you find yourself in the role as being as a mentor and a coach for folks? And it really boiled down to situations where business coaches had such a profound positive impact on me, okay, on many, many levels. But most importantly, they gave me the tools to be able to evaluate what my value offering is and my unique value proposition, right? Because so many of us live in overwhelm, self-doubt, anxiety, and it really doesn't matter what our background is, our educational experience. So much of it has to do, obviously, with our conditioning, that goes outside of the formal education, right? The headspace that happens between our two ears. So it often starts with a mindset shift and being able to help people to get beyond all that. So prior to me doing all of this, like I said, I kind of started my role really way back. I grew up in a scenario where I grew up in the construction business. So anybody who knows anything about the construction business, particularly on the development side, in our house there was money, you were broke. Money broke. There was no consistency. There was a lot of anxiety about money, and that was not something that I don't have any negative feelings for, but it was just a reality. So it conditioned my response to money and stress and anxiety, where it can easily trigger levels of overwhelm. And most people's mindset with respect to money, putting themselves out there, fear of being rejected, the whole people pleasing scenarios, there's all kind of really there. In households like that, that becomes like the optimal brewing area for all those things to happen into a person's brain. So I'll share this quick story, and I usually share, this is a really interesting thing. Oftentimes, the times where the switch goes off happens when you least expect it. So for me, I was following all the ranks, checking off all the boxes that I thought I had to check off. I was involved in business. I grew up, self-funded my education, being, working in my father's construction business. Then I took, the role of running jobs and taking on all that responsibility. Very early on, I went to law school. I got an accounting. I also had an accounting degree. So it was all highly analytical, highly structured, very, very kind of in your head type of behavior. All right. So, after a period of time, I had gone through that process. I quickly, after about 4 years doing legal work, working for a small firm, like a medium-sized, like a mom and pop firm, kind of burnt out fairly quickly. And I found myself trying to really just make some more money and gain some control over my life from that first round. And that's where I worked for a large corporation and selling legal publications and legal products for a company which is now called Thomson Reuters. Big company then. Right back in the day, it was still a privately held company. Had a very interesting culture. And then during my stay, it went public. There was some situational things happening within my individual territory. I was in more of a governmental role. So my role was to manage all of the government accounts in New Jersey and in Delaware. So if we think back to, say, the 2000s, the economy was the state was very much in the red. So my territory, after doing really, really well for a number of years, it kind of turned on its head in about 2003. And my pipeline dried up overnight because, my main client, the state, basically put a kibosh on all spending so they can balance their budget. So it was a time where it was like, okay, now what do I have to do? Immediately going into that fight or flight, survival, high level survival mode. From that point, I wound up doing what most people do, is I resorted back to what things I knew, right? So even though I had a law degree and I was practicing law, I was so in my head about that. I was like, I don't want to do that at all because it just created stress and anxiety. So what did I do? At that time, I had some money saved. I had done pretty well in the sales space. I started buying real estate, flipping houses. And before you know it, had 5 employees, doing spot developments, had brought my brother in and my father. And my mindset was to really bring a really great, create a family business. And we were doing well until 2008, right? And we all remember what happened in 2008. So it was, we had real estate holdings that were turned upside down virtually overnight. We had projects that were midstream. So it was a really stressful environment. And I found myself trying to, having to dig out of a really deep hole that, look, it's very easy to think about, oh, well, you should have known, or things like that. But I am one of thousands upon thousands of entrepreneurs who were just so stuck in the trenches. Nobody forecasted what was going to happen in 2008. I mean, unless you were an analyst and studying at high level, the guy out there in the trenches just trying to get it done wasn't looking at how the financial markets and the real estate markets were so tightly linked that would cause essentially a collapse of the banking system. So as a result of that, I was again stuck in a situation like, what the hell am I going to do? And it was really stressful. And the time I've been married for 26 years. I've been with my wife since we're 15. So my wife, God bless her, she's been the anchor and the foundation of all my business ventures, and just has stuck with me through it all. So I can't speak. I can't say anything more. I can never stop praising what she's done. But she stuck with me. But I was like, of course, being the male, saying, how the heck am I going to get out of this? And I was highly overwhelmed. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, even now, because there's a lot of turmoil going on right now. So at that time, I found myself saying, okay, instead of me trying to find a job, because if you remember back in that time, it was a lot of uncertainty. Again, very similar to where we were now. I said, people aren't going to hire a guy who's been out on his own, right? They want, so I said, let me just start doing, again, going back to what I thought was familiar with me. So I opened up a law office, started representing clients, anybody I can get my hands on who I can feel I can help. I work with them. I ultimately got hooked up with a law firm, but there was so much turmoil internally in my head that I have a moment in time specifically which kind of turned the light on for me. And that's when I was actually appearing at a court hearing. Okay. We call it municipal court when people have traffic stops and things like that. It's pretty much like it's like the everyday people's court, so to speak. And I was representing a guy who had a suspended license. And I showed up early, like all the attorneys usually do, so we get a chance to maybe work out a deal with the prosecutor, what have you. And a lot of times the police officers and things are back there. So I was in this conference room, like 7:30 in the morning. The energy must have been so strong coming off of me, of being just anxious and overwhelmed, just pissed off, frankly. A guy came up to me. I had no idea who he was. And he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, you need to read the 4 agreements. And I looked at him. I'm like, what? Like, what? Now, of course, I'm from Jersey. Okay. So, I mean, like, there's attitude, right? But I didn't take attitude. I'm like, so, you know, I, I took it in there for a minute. I'm like, why, what are you talking about? He said, I was just like you. He said, he said, and I lost my family. I got a divorce. I was angry and frustrated. Now, mind you, I never met this person ever in my life. Okay. And I don't even know his name at this point. But he said these things, and we had this really brief conversation, and I didn't take it lightly. I bought the book. And that was the first time that I started reading works that were related to personal development, understanding, the mind-body connection, how to start understanding how to eliminate brain chatter and not pay attention to the endless mind talk that plagues so many of us. Okay. So that was like the first foray of me recognizing that, you know what, I deserve to work on myself. I deserve to maybe be a little easier on myself, because a lot of high performers, a lot of people, particularly because I work with a lot of service professionals, licensed people who kind of checked off all the boxes, people just like me who live in their head so much. All right. So that was like step number one for me. And then a few years later, when I was looking for a transition again, because my wife and I were then running the corporate and like professional ladder. She was working as a pharmaceutical rep for a really large pharmaceutical company. I was, like I said, doing my legal thing. And we were, from the outside, we were doing it really good. Lived in a nice house, drove the nice cars, everything. But, I would open up the door at night. And oftentimes I was doing night work because I was representing towns at the time. I'd come home 10:30, 11 o'clock. My wife would still be at the computer, just, upset, frustrated, overwhelmed. We had a young daughter at the time, and we're like, something's got to change. So at that point is I kind of realized, I'm like, what do lawyers do when we need to get answers in areas we don't know? I want to hire an expert. And again, it was one of those situations where the universe kind of came in alignment, and I was introduced to a business coach through someone who introduced us to the idea of saying, hey, I'm going to teach you how to create a leveraged income. Because if you want to break away from the grind, you've got to create income streams. Now, prior to being prior to this this time, I was very familiar and a product and a student of Robert Kiyosaki, right? So we all know Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He's an amazing guy, Cash Flow Quadrant, great books. And if you recall, if you read those books, he often talks about, empowering yourself financially through real estate, leveraged income opportunities, investments, intellectual property, things along those lines. And I had, up to that point, thought I was doing well in real estate, but unfortunately, I got kind of caught in that cycle. So I was looking for something else to kind of build some more economic independence. And he introduced us to one of his clients who was involved with a network marketing company. Company's called Isogenics, which is an amazing health and wellness company that's based out of Arizona. And within a very short period of time, my wife and I made a decision to commit to it. And that was another huge turning point because, within a 12-month span, we were making like six figures, right? And building a team and leading and guiding people. And I realized at that point, all of my collective experience and my years as, serving other people as an attorney started to translate into being able to empathetically talk to folks. Okay. And recognizing the pain that people are going through, because I went through it, through taking those risks and putting myself out there. And we all hear that putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations. I did it all. I mean, I had given countless presentations in front of hundreds of people in all different circumstances. I did the setups in people's living rooms. I mean, you name it, I did it. But because of that, it built up those muscles and that level of fortitude and just to create some, I call it, habit, skills, and mindset of being successful as an entrepreneur. And then it was a matter of how I can teach it to other people. So for years, I would do it through the network marketing space. And then it was always one of these scenarios where I was like, wow, you should be doing this, more formally. So by 2018, I started doing that. And since that time, I've coached and mentored, again, tons of people, primarily in the service base, service professional base and entrepreneurial space, because that's what I know, right? We all have our area of expertise, and we live in an area where you have to be really refined and niched. And I found that the best way I could serve people is to serve folks who are just, who are traveling a very similar path that I'm on. They just may be a few steps back. So
there's just so much to unpack there, and I just love your story going from, I think you said in your bio, 1998 was when you got your law degree and finished
right.
that, and then obviously pivoting to real estate, losing that in 2008, of course, and then within that time frame, being able to get into more of that mindset, like you said, mindset and skill set. And let me ask you, when you, because I love that what you mentioned, the serendipity of that individual. You didn't know him, he doesn't know you, but he had that conversation with you, and like you said, you still remember. You don't remember the guy's name, but you remember that book, and that was a turning point. And it's really cool that you were able to do very well in real estate without having the right mindset and doing a lot of that like self-improvement stuff. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit further. What did you kind of, after analyzing your process and kind of getting into that a little bit in the self-improvement world, what did you learn about yourself that really helped you, embrace the other ventures that you did later on in life?
Right. That's a great question. So it really started with the idea, first and foremost, recognizing that I deserve to define my own path. Okay. So many of us do things. And like I said, we check off all those boxes, oftentimes to satisfy other people. And it's not a negative thing. It's not something that you can have to hold resentment to, because most people in your life, who care for you or you look up to, oftentimes they have, very good intentions, and, they're modeling their message to you based on their experience. But when you see how few people actually delve in to the process of unwrapping the levels of like this negative self-talk, and how to, like I said, quiet that inner chatter and recognize that it's not designed to actually propel your life. It's actually designed to keep you safe and kind of keep you in situations, oftentimes in that overwhelm situation, because if you stay guarded, you eliminate the chance of getting, failures or bad things happening to you. So, that was something that was really imperative to me. And once I really, that, when I opened up that box, and it was like, wow. The second book that I remember reading was Psychology of Achievement by Brian Tracy. Now, some of these are older books, right? Because this goes back quite a while, but that's another great starter, because that was the second time, where it was like light bulb moments, like, wow, I could actually start defining my own life, right? And embracing the journey, recognizing that, the way you measure the success is not like from the ultimate outcome. It's about having the bravery and the clarity, and then the resistance. I mean, the fortitude to just go through the process, and recognizing that, those marginal wins, those incremental wins are going to carry you. And then also understanding that, again, so many of us, particularly who are more in traditional employment roles or things like that, we think very linear. Okay. So when you think linear, a person's perspective is formatted in that approach. And then because they've had some, because they were in a situation where there was a more structured process to how their career may be going, that's how they kind of attributed where they think entrepreneurialism is like. But it's not. I say entrepreneurialism is like chaos theory in reality. Things are happening, and so many different dimensions that I really work with clients to help them understand that you have to get comfortable in that space and comfortable in the fact that you're not going to have control over a lot of things at the very beginning. Okay. And then once you can learn to manage that mindset and recognizing what it means to be kind of living without a safety net per se, whether it's perceived or real, that's a whole shift that no one ever fully, becomes like Teflon. It's just a matter of, we all still experience all these things. It's just a matter of being able to create the tools, right? And constantly be refueling the right messaging so we can handle these adversity in a way that we don't implode and really don't take into account the progress that we're making along the way, and recognizing that the journey is extremely non-linear. It can be cyclical, it can be spikes, it can be drops. I mean, if you and I, let's if we just think about it, the whole world has gone through 2 years of being in lockdown. Right now we're in hyperinflation, and there's a war going on, and gas prices are $5 a gallon. People are downsizing. People are really in hyper alert mode. And if we as business owners and entrepreneurs don't know how to keep forging ahead and not living in our head, but just understanding that we're going to get through this, that it's a cycle, and we're going to have to make shifts, right? Have to make shifts along the way. But I think if that approach, and then having a mentor and a guide through that process, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, I love what you said, because you brought up a really good point there, Mike, because it's not that the like you said, the hecticness ever goes away. It will always be hectic, but it's a matter of building systems and processes and boundaries in your life that facilitate that hecticness to bring a little bit more clarity to it. And that's what I love about what you just said, because even when you go up to high six-figure business, to a $3 million business, or 10 million to $100 million business, right? Whatever it looks like, whatever that trajectory is, the reality is that it's not that the hecticness or life or business gets easier. It's just that, okay, now you've been able to get better, but also build the right systems and processes to facilitate that. So let's talk a little bit about those processes and systems to be able to facilitate kind of, maybe clearer decision making, or clearer, time management, or whatever. When you're working with your clients, what kind of systems or processes or boundaries do you, help, implement in their life to facilitate that kind of better result in there?
That's a great question. So the first thing I work with folks about, and letting them understand and recognize, is that, again, if you think about most of the folks who I work with, who are, anyone who, a lot of times, if you're a service-based professional, you're a licensed professional, and you're basically, an eat what you kill type scenario, where everything relates specifically to your individual performance. The first thing I teach people is you have to understand that you're going to have to learn to delegate. Okay. There's too many dynamics going on in the modern business world for any one person to really be effective in all of them. You've got to identify what your strong points are, what your weaknesses are. Kind of like I go through like individual SWOT analysis, right, for the person, right? And then it's just a matter of saying, okay, who do you know, and who do you want to put into the right type of seats? I'm a big fan of Gino Wickman's book, Traction. I don't know if you ever read that book. It's a phenomenal book. Dan Sullivan's book's great. They talk about these things. And, I feel as a business coach, it's my responsibility to be ahead of the curve, so that all these things that I felt and I struggled with, and I found resolutions towards, then I can then share it with my other, with the clients. So I found that a lot of times, like I'm working with somebody right now who is in, highly successful in their job. Okay. But obviously so used to performing, individually, having a hard time letting go of tasks, right? Because they're just so conditioned with the mindset of, I have to do everything. You're never going to get anywhere with this idea of doing everything. And I was one of those guys as an entrepreneur. Oftentimes you are a utility person. You know, you're solving immediate problems. You're looking for, forward to have to look towards the future. Your management one day, your sales the next. Now, all these things are true. And then obviously, as a business owner, you need to have a clear understanding of what those roles are, but you also now have to learn to delegate, okay, and bring people in to do that. And that's where also I really work with clients to understand kind of from a financial planning standpoint. I'm very fortunate that, I have an accounting degree and I own businesses. So I understand the importance of financials. I understand the importance of keeping current on your financials so that you can get really good snapshots of where you are and also know where you need to be with respect to, whether you're just launching a business, how to build cash reserves, how to maintain, a lot of times people who are doing what we call side hustles or starting their own business, I tell them that, like, oftentimes people they want to start their own business because they're frustrated and they hate their other job or things like that. So I oftentimes will help them to reframe their mindset about their current job. And I'll tell them that, hey, this is funding your business, right? Because particularly for newbies, or when people are entering into new areas in their business, they don't understand the timeline of how long it typically takes to really start getting enough consistent cash flow to be able to pull some profit, manage your overhead, and build and invest in the business. So it's a very dynamic process that I work with clients on so they understand it and they don't quit.
And that's huge because delegation is a very, very powerful thing. And I've worked with a lot of clients as well that struggle with that. Personally, one, because they think they know the best thing to do and that nobody else can do it better. But the reality is acquire a skill, like marketing, right? Understand that skill a little bit, but you don't have to be the expert. Find the who that knows how to do it a lot better than you, so you can delegate that and move on. You're thinking like the CEO or the business owner should be thinking more strategically and how to obviously where should we go, what's happening, joint ventures, strategic partners, things like that. Now, let me ask you, because let's dial this in, because I like what you're saying. You're leveraging your time as a business owner for higher productive um, results, right? Higher productive activities that create better results. And so I always like to call it the 4%, right? What should I spend 4% of my time actually doing that are high leverage activities that only I can do that produce the biggest result, right? Someone else can sit there and write an email. Someone else can do copywriting. Someone else can, do the measurements and like you said, a bookkeeper, a CPA, all that stuff. But what are the 4% of activities? And after, measuring and really helping a lot of high performers, business owners, and service providers, really scale their businesses and not just their business, but their life. What have you found is the most common, like 4% that they should be focusing their time and their energy and effort into that create the best activity?
Well, that's that. So I think a lot of that will be dictated on where they are within their business, right? It's the season of of their business. So when they're first launching and first starting, it's first going through this process of number one, understanding, getting clear on what their value proposition is to the world. Because if we don't clearly define this problem that we can have a solution towards, and then be able to authentically communicate it to our target audience, then that's a big problem right off the bat. So oftentimes, like, it depends on, it's working to build a clear branded message, right? That defines that. I really tell them, if you need to be able to have that elevator pitch where it's extremely clear so that when you're out there forging those relationships and getting people to know what it is that you do, you have to be able to root it with a problem which your core audience is looking to have solved. So I know, and what I found is with me, service-based professionals and entrepreneurs are often living in overwhelm and frustration. Okay. So how do we eliminate that so they actually can profit in their business and move forward? So that's usually the first step. So oftentimes I say the first thing, some of the things we talked about earlier from the budgeting standpoint, because you are the CEO, you are the person who has to understand the whole entire playing field and level. But if you are the voice or the face of the business, then a lot of the core components, I'd say like the first year, is going to be about creating brand awareness, right? Getting comfortable with being able to deliver that message to your audience consistently enough where you're going to start gaining an audience. All right. And so that's kind of first thing. And then number two, it's all about how do you then identify revenue points that could bring revenue in, right? A lot of times, I know even for me, like my ultimate goal is to scale my brand further along so I can reach more people, right? But that was not things that I did consistently. Most of my business up to this point has been referrals, right? A lot of belly to belly marketing and just pure relationships. Because again, pre-pandemic, I was at networking events all the time, right? I created um, uh, a community of people who knew who I was and what I did. Okay, but then pandemic happened. So okay, how are we going to shift here? Then I also now moved to a whole nother area. So I'm really glad and happy to that there's a situation now where I live now, there's more opportunities for that one-on-one belly to belly relationship building, because I think it's extremely important. But also it's about now creating the brand and getting out there. So these are the same type of challenges that folks who I'm working with are going to be facing. So getting clear on that brand, identifying what their revenue points are going to be so they can start bringing revenue in, having a good, clear context of where their existing revenue structures are, and that they can keep the right mindset associated with that so they don't put themselves in a situation where they run out of cash. Okay, and cash flow, because it's going to take more time than they probably realize. And there's skill sets that have to be developed that take time and refinement. Just like you and I are having this conversation, there's a lot of people who get really nervous about delivering content through video, right? It's challenging for them. So these are all the things that we work through, and then oftentimes it's helping them to shift from a more employment mentality to a more entrepreneurial mentality, which, like we talked about earlier, feeling comfortable in that space where the dynamics are far more resounding than when you're reporting to a job.
Yeah, and that's so valuable because it really depends upon where they're at in that journey. Because obviously, advice to a $3 million business owner is tremendously different than someone that's just starting, that's wanting to quit their
100%.
job and so forth. And so, really having that discernment to figure out, okay, where you're at, what's going on, and then obviously having that right perspective. And obviously, since each one of those kind of value steps, it's like you're able to give them the right path to be able to do that. Now, kind of coming back to the value prop, I think this is very valuable because you're exactly right. What's so interesting is I was talking to a friend of mine. He's done very well in the corporate world. And I said, you have a lot of information that you can then give and give value to in training and teaching. And in today's world, people will pay for that, And what was interesting, it was a mindset switch for him, but also we had to develop his kind of value prop. And so I'd like to ask you, Mike, when you're working with a client or maybe one of our listeners, because even if you're doing six figures, maybe a high six figures, you can always dial in your value prop and understand, your value proposition as well as your client and your avatar a little bit further. So how do you walk through the process with someone brand new or someone that's even mid six figures to be able to help them scale to that next level? What's that process?
Well, I think the folks who we talked about who are more in the beginning phases, we kind of covered some of those topics. So it's helpfully identify those initial benchmarks. But to talk about the folks who are more seasoned or who already have some levels of success, a lot of times that's a matter of really talking to them about understanding that they have to reevaluate where they are in their business, and again, kind of look at it in a way where the gaps are specifically. And here's the thing that I found with folks who are, hit a certain level. Because we do it, right? We know, you bust your butt to get to a certain level. Okay. I know how challenging it is to be an entrepreneur and create a consistent income that you can build a life on. That takes a lot of work, right? I mean, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of focus. So the folks who are looking, when I talk to people who are already there, first and foremost, the question is I don't aggressively try and pitch things to them if their antenna is not up to actually want to learn. Okay. I'm in a situation now, like I work with some lawyers who have an existing law firm. Okay. Now, if you think of lawyers, I mean, for the most part, they solve problems for other people. It's very challenging for them sometimes to step back and recognize that they actually need help and be more open with the process. So a lot of times I'll tell them, in order to grow your business, you have to reach more people. That's usually a mindset shift with respect to realigning their approach towards sales and marketing. Okay. Most people who are in that space, a lot of us get there through just pure drive, determination, and our individual work. And then we talked about those other things about delegation and things like that. But then it's a matter of reevaluating how they envision sales and marketing, and then being able to be open to that process, to embrace the concept of really honing in their understanding on what's going on in the modern age on how to be effective to reach more people, and retool it. Because as I mentioned to you earlier, how we did things, even pre-pandemic, is obviously totally different than what we're doing now. And even further back, a lot of these old schoolers, because if you think about the trajectory, it usually takes about 5 to 7 years to really get enough momentum in your business where there's consistent earnings. That's lifetimes ago from a marketing standpoint, and what they may have been doing then is completely different. And oftentimes it's like they if they want to grow their business, they have to recognize that they have to get their branded message to new audiences. All right. And how to do that is through, like I said, redefining their understanding of marketing and sales, and then committing to a process to do it, and believing in it, and being consistent with it. It's just required. And if we look at all the folks that we look up to and mentor, I mean, they're omnipresent on social media. They're out there doing it, and I tell folks that's what you have to do to grow your business, and then create systems, as you talked about earlier, to bring people through a process and a system that is as clean as possible. And also recognize that people now more than ever don't want to just be sold something and then feel that they're really just a number. That human connection, that those core foundations of building really good service, customer service relationships, value driven type of approaches towards clients will go a super long way.
Yeah, you're saying some really valuable stuff, because and specifically in marketing and sales, because I mean, definitely with, I know you mentioned this and you created a good Facebook Live the other day, and we'll talk about that here shortly, but it's like, what worked 2 years ago is not going to work now. And, people get over-inundated. I remember webinars were real big, just maybe 3-4 years ago,
Yeah.
and sitting there on a 90-minute webinar and all that. And that really worked. And then now it's more of a schedule a phone call funnel kind of stuff. And, everybody's scheduling phone calls and asking for a phone call, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of know that process already because you've done it 100,000 times, and now you're getting more of value creation. And I know Gary V, he's been on that train for many years. But it's like you said, it's being authentic and building that relationship on the front end more so than pitching them and then just having this really quick transaction. It's more of a transformation now, and that's what people are really desiring. So let's kind of talk into kind of your Facebook Live, and talking about like that authenticity that people are desiring right now in the marketplace.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. A lot of solopreneurs, small business owners, things like that. We leverage, say, virtual assistants. Virtual assistants are an amazing tool, right? But I guarantee you, as you go into your LinkedIn and you look at the inboxes, you can point from 1,000 miles away what was written by a VA or something where it's just copy and paste. Do you have any time for those? No, it's instant delete, 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 delete. It's noise. You're actually annoying people. You're not adding any real value. The impression that you're sending out to people is you're just trying to hit your numbers, right? With the hope that there's going to be one person. It's like the law of numbers. And I totally get that on certain levels. But my position is I feel you're better off speaking to a smaller, refined audience that you relate to, as opposed to just these mass type of messaging and things that are done with. And I have a VA. I love my VA. She's excellent, right? It's an ongoing journey, right? On how to refine it to do it in an effective way. But I always say, like, it cannot be situations that when I'm doing inboxes to folks or things like that, it's very rarely like just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste, because nobody's got time for it. So that kind of leads into what I was talking about on my Facebook Live. It's all about that authenticity, right? And oftentimes it's recognizing that, building that connection does take time. It can't be forced. I'm a strong believer in the reality that people can build valuable, that no trust factor through online. There's no doubt you could do it if you're consistent, authentic, and you respect who your audience is. So as I mentioned to you earlier, Nick, I talked about in the Facebook Live, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, is if you look what's going on in our current situation, people are in survival mode or anxiety mode. There's a lot of dynamics going on. Some people are tuning it out entirely because they just want to, not get their headspace crowded with all the negativity. But there does come a time where you have to kind of just look at the objective facts that's going on. And, it's showing up so much in everybody's life now, particularly with the inflation. I mean, with, pricing through the roof, financial markets having really low, having real transitional situations, and we all are dealing with it. I mean, was talking to a client last night, my personal situation, things that conservative investments, things that I know in my own personal scenario where they were, always brought good returns or were good, stable investments. There's so much volatility that I recognize that, wow, this is happening to a lot of people. Now, of course, you got the higher echelon people where it will have no impact on them because they have enough margin and cushion where they'll be able to get through it. But now more than ever, I mean, that economic shift that's happening where people who are like you said, the six figures and even the multiple six figures. Now, I kid around with my one buddy. He's like, he wants to start a podcast on, how to live day by day on $350,000 a year. That's insanity when you think about it, but it's true. This is where we are in our current space. So we as business owners and entrepreneurs, service providers need to recognize that and adjust.
And so speaking of that, now that we are kind of realizing that, the marketing strategy, and it's not just a matter of marketing strategy, it's about just being authentic and relational on the front end. And also, scaling the unscalable, right? That is a long-term approach. And I know that sometimes, right now we need income now, we need, sales now, right? But long-term, you create better clients, you create longer term clients, LTV is just better for that. So kind of let's talk a little bit about that. What are certain things that our audience could do to come across as more authentic and showing up and being vulnerable, if you will?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, so I'm sorry. But you said all I heard was, "What can our audience do?" And then it got a little muddled, so I apologize.
No, you're fine. I apologize. So what I was basically saying is that it's really good information. I think it's very valuable um, for this, that we're going to be talking about this. But I was just asking, you mentioned that this is a key thing that our audience needs to be kind of aware of. And I guess
hmm
my question is what are certain action steps that our audience could start doing to
Got it.
implement more of that authentic approach or more vulnerable approach and having just that more relational aspect?
Well, that's where leadership comes in. You know, that's where leadership comes in quite a bit, because it's in these times is when we have to lead and we have to do things to show an example and recognize that these are real problems that we're all encountering and we're moving ahead in spite of and doing the things that we're leading with integrity uh, in our personal life. I think that's another really important thing. Now, obviously, look, there's different personality types out there. I'm not going to gravitate towards everyone, right? I have to focus on the people who I know I can serve best and who can relate to who I am. I know the type of person who I deal with, and relate to, very clearly. So I focus on those solutions to those types of people because, if not, you're just dealing with people who are just on two different vibrational levels. So you have to understand, any of us have to understand who those people are and kind of hone in on who we can serve best. So, but I think the idea of, like I said to you earlier, is like, yeah, leading through the process, also leaning into what folks who we aspire to and what they're doing, and retooling our uh, toolbox so that we can then go out there, do it, get the measurable results, transfer that over to our client base. Again, mine is, what I do is so, when you do one-on-one coaching with people, um, it's very personal, right? I mean, that's why I say I kind of get deep in the weeds. And every client who I've worked with over the years, obviously there's certain benchmarks that are similar overall, but there is a level of customization that has to happen because everybody's life is different, and you have to be able to adjust and relate to what it is that they're doing. So, to answer your question, like I said, I think it comes back to then just us showing up as leaders, and following you know people who we aspire to, what they're doing, and then taking action in a way that is meaningful to our core audience, and not and again, being authentic in that communication style. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's another big thing that I work with people about, like, particularly, again, like, if you think of lawyers, accountants, engineers, people who have to have very limited margins of error in their end result to their clients. I tell them in the entrepreneurial space, it's not going to be perfect. You got to get out there and do it, and show by example and lead by example.
Yep, you're exactly right, and I appreciate you just sharing that because it takes courage and it takes obviously vulnerability. And I like that approach. What you're saying is the authenticity, right? People can smell a scammer or a spammer, a mile away, right? And the reality is that you just got to be authentic and just sharing your story and understanding who you are, what you do, and being able to, just like you said, attract. Right? There are some people that you're not going to attract, and that's okay. But you're going to attract the right clients to your business by showing up and doing that, which is really awesome. Now, Mike, tell me, where can our audience reach out to you, can follow you, can engage with you and some of your content and potentially be a client of yours?
Well, I think right now, thank you for that. The easiest way to connect with me is if you want to do one-on-one, just send me an email and it's Mike at MikeColuzzi.com. It's MIKE at MIKECOLUZZI.com. Can't get much simpler than that. Send me an email. Just said, hey, I listened to you on Christian's podcast. You resonated with me. I would love to talk. I mean, it's really super, super simple. I'm that's the easiest way to do that. If they want to follow me, obviously they can go, on LinkedIn at Michael Coluzzi. Just go on LinkedIn and click at Michael Coluzzi. You'll find me right there. And then of course on Facebook, similar situations. I also offer I have a private group that people can join. It's free, that I provide content on. I provide them with opportunities to connect with other business people. And it's really comprises of people who I feel I can serve best: service-based professionals, entrepreneurs, so folks who are experiencing the same types of things. And I create opportunities for them to collaborate, for them to get to know each other, to help them build their network and create meaningful connections. But mostly, by connecting with me, that's about scheduling a 20-minute call. Usually it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I have a series of questions to start to uncover what it is that they're looking to achieve over the next 12 months and what their current approach is, and then where their levels of vulnerabilities are, so that we can identify how I may be able to help. And through that process, it's usually pretty clear as to whether or not we're a good fit. And if so, we go through the process. My engagements are usually about on 3-month increments, because I feel that those are good. 90 days is a good benchmark for anything if you're consistent with it. So I meet with people each week, assigned time, half hour, and then there's a task list that we follow based upon what it is they're looking to achieve. So again, Mike at MikeColuzzi.com is the easiest way to do that. And if that's appealable to them, I would be more than happy to talk to them and see how I can help them.
Awesome. And guys, those descriptions and those links will actually be in the description below. So you make sure, and his email will be right there. So you can just literally copy and paste it and email him directly as well. And Mike, again, just I really appreciate you diving into a lot of the strategy, the strategic approach, the mindset, kind of the paradigm shift that you have to really scale and take your life to the next level, and just sharing your transformational story as well. But before we let you go, Mike, is there any last words that you'd like to share with our audience?
I would just say, at the end of the day, it's really simply about being kind to yourself, really, ultimately, and enjoying each day as best as possible. I know we're going through a lot of difficult situations. We all are. But the fact is, if you can really just be kinder and easier on yourself, oftentimes that will help a whole heck of a lot to eliminate a lot of unnecessary frustration and anxiety and overwhelm. And, you deserve to, if you're looking to do something, that you really deserve to get that mentorship. I think it's really, really important, whether it's me or anyone who you feel you can relate to best. Those are really core things so that you could, move forward in your life. I think it's really important to do those things.
That's awesome. I love it. I want to footstop on that. Mike, thank you so much for joining us, man. It was such a pleasure just talking a lot about this stuff here. And guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast with Mike Coluzzi. Make sure you follow up with him. Make sure you connect with him and reach out to him. Guys, until next time, remember, be uncommon.